I'd like to say that an interpreter works not only for negotiation, but for other events as well. But here I'll briefly talk about negotiation specifically. Wouldn't be wasting my time on anything else, because each type of work has its own special features. It's beyond doubt that one more time. Okay, it goes without saying that the external characteristics of interpreter. So, an interpreter appears to be a real shadow. We're always standing next to the speaker. We lean slightly forward to the participant of negotiation, and we're trying to not to stand out. In terms of professional skills, we're always conveying as close to the original information that we can, and we include emotions too. In this aspect, we really are a shadow. Even in terms of clothes, we're trying to replicate the style of the dress code of the events. So here you might call them wallpaper. People, the Western colleagues really call it that way, wallpaper. But if you're allowed, if I may say so, this is the only similarity between the wallpaper and the shadow role that we play. So coming back to why is this really important to select an expert interpreter in order to organize negotiation. This is mainly because they're worried that this is a person that they don't know. It's always a risk zone because they don't know what to expect during negotiation, and they don't know how this person is going to affect the negotiation result. And the result is basically what the negotiation is all about, and the next move. And it determines the next move for cooperation, usually connected to large funds, if we're talking about business negotiations. And this will be the focus of my talk. Of course, it's a potential danger of secrets disclosure, because we know that this is really important, non-disclosure of sensitive information, and many of interpreters will have faced the problem of signing an NDA, or sometimes you're even being threatened, as happened to me once. My own experience tells me not only all these factors impact on the search and selection of translator and interpreter. These factors are easy to understand, the anxiety of the organizers. There are certain factors and they are very objective, that really impact on the subjectivity of an interpreter. To name but a few: cooperation history. When for a long time, for many months or years even, when we've been cooperating with the same customer, we subconsciously think about their affairs as our own. We're really interested in his success, so that he would achieve the very best profitable result, so that everything might happen as I would like it to be. And this is not a planned sentiment. It's just due to the fact that we've been for a long time cooperating with certain companies and businessmen, and we know their plans and aspirations. The next factor, and here it doesn't really matter whether you know the person for a long time, is the liking. We like certain people more than others. We cannot be totally impartial to any person we meet. So in one way or another, we sometimes take to the person more or less, and there are various reasons for this liking. It can be due to your personal or even political convictions. And the third factor, this is not very good, but an interpreter can have his own personal interest when he is personally interested in the negotiation outcome, when he somehow benefits from one of the other parties. It can be a commission or something else. Well, I'll talk about that a bit later. All these objective factors of subjectivity testify to the fact that interpreter is simply human. I wouldn't want to say or to judge whether it's good or bad, but this is a fact of life. So these factors of subjectivity lead to the fact that in the end, apart from doing the shadow or the furniture, the wallpaper role, interpreter plays some other roles as well. First of them is the buffer. It's a peculiar thing. I'm not sure. Maybe there are people among you who have experienced this kind of situation, because I remember my first experience, the brightest memories that I have. There was a situation in which an Irish company was going to build a factory here in Ukraine, and they were negotiating land rent and so on, big money involved, and they clearly distributed the duties between managers, directors, and at first one of them negotiated everything successfully, and then the financial director comes in order to sign an agreement, who had an absolutely different figure, money. So money is something leads to big emotional outbursts among businessmen, and the financial director was met by the Ukrainian representative who had already negotiated everything with the mayor of one of the cities in our country. So you can imagine what kind of meeting and dialogue it was. You may see 11 p.m. late at night, after the person has been received at the airport and so on. Our representative was not holding his tongue much, and he was really emotional. The Irish representative, intending to pay less, was very calm, but I had to stand in between, and during interpretation these passionate talks were calming down after a while, and in the end they agreed on a normal solution, and then the very next days they had the negotiation with the mayor and everything was fine. But unfortunately a crisis in 2008 prevented them from collaboration. But the buffer role exists. I wouldn't want to say that that is always the case, that it has to be the case. One of my colleagues sometimes says that he intentionally interprets all word to word of his customers, because if he destroys furniture, if he shouts, or if he is not afraid of using strong language, you have to translate it literally. Well, you don't destroy the furniture yourself, but you really have to follow him close word for word. An interesting role is the spy role. A spy is quite a strong word, of course, but I think that people who have a lot of experience in interpreting would truly understand. You might have heard it. What are they talking about? Please tell me everything. They're talking in a quiet voice. Have a look there on the director's table. You see some papers and documents in there, and there are competitors' logo, and they definitely is their price. You have to see it and tell it to me. Frankly speaking, I don't like it, and I don't doing. But that happens though, and I cannot avoid it. We have to understand how to behave if we're faced with these kinds of requests. The next role is the lobbyist role, or an assistant. Also, you comply with the interest of the customer. It comes very naturally if you've been working for a long time with the same customer. If you really understand his interests, his plans, and you can foresee the next step and so on. It happens unconsciously, and you do it absolutely automatically. Sometimes you're aware of that if you work for this particular company. Finally, the last role I'm going to talk about, but the list can be longer if you deem it necessary. I'll be really, really glad if you add more roles to this list. So I'm talking about the agent's role. You can say, this is importable, this is wrong, shouldn't be happening. This does happen though, and I can even prove it. I have the proof. So what kind of role is this? An agent is a person who promotes signing certain agreements for certain pay, of course, so that he gets commissions afterwards. You wouldn't believe it, but all the guidance, any kind of guidance that I was able to set my eyes on, guidance on how to negotiate. If interpreter is there during this negotiation, all the guidance say that an interpreter can have his own or her own interest, and you have to be really, really careful. You have to keep an eye on them, and to make sure that he interprets very clearly, and to make sure that your interests are safeguarded.
All right. Something I can add is that the role of an interpreter is very important. Of course, I started the presentation with that, but also, the interpreter always knows the cultural and national background of both parties that are meeting, and he happens to help understand the mentality, the cultural code, the traditions of another party, and this is always a positive addition to the issue for both parties. I know that in countries where they speak Arabic language, even if you speak fluent Arabic and you're able to speak, it's better to use the services of an interpreter, because they know exactly when to say certain things. They'll stop you when you're crossing the line or saying something not so smart, and when you're saying things that might lead to conflict and a negative result of the negotiations. In order to find out how the role of the interpreter is tackled by colleagues from around the world, I posted in one of the groups at LinkedIn, at a group called Professional Translators and Interpreters, and I posted a question. Which role does the interpreter play in the process of negotiations? Is he or she just a shadow or an influence maker? And the results were quite interesting. There were comments from representatives of 15 countries. It was really pleasant to receive those, and they were Armenia, Latvia, USA, Brazil, Egypt, Japan, India, France, Great Britain, Paraguay, Switzerland, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, and Russia. Out of these 15 responders to the question, 8 people told me that yes, really, the interpreter is an influence maker, and seven answered that the interpreter shouldn't is an expert who should be impartial, unbiased, and never mingle within the process. And the influence might be a risky thing for himself as well as for the negotiating parties. So this result was very interesting for me, and I'd like to engage you into a discussion because I think controversial opinions might add. Unfortunately, we have no time for questions, but I think we have for quite a short maybe question or comment. Hello? You were very special about the administrative side of the issue and the approach. What about the approach? Are there any resources that you might recommend for further reading, for the art of negotiation? If it's somewhere where you could get further knowledge on the issue. I can't recommend right now. You can read the information that the participants of the negotiating process receive. Maybe not for the translator, but for the parties. You might want to read manuals or guidelines for people who are about to participate in negotiations so that you understand what is expected from you as an interpreter. I mean, of course, you should come prepared, as you have already heard, but the customer is interested to see you as a certain, to see you comply or not comply with certain rules or regulations. Maybe you can give any standards or... Absolutely. Everything that I've been talking about, all of this happens. All of this sometimes happens behind the curtains, under the surface. It's not so noticeable. What do people notice? The preparation, your language skills, of course. That's an absolute must. Well, it's a must for you and me, but sometimes people don't show the necessary level of language skills. Then, of course, your appearance, right? You should choose your clothes, the manner of conduct, that meets the general atmosphere and complies with it. Concerning your language skills, I think that memory is crucial for a translator, for an interpreter. Sometimes the negotiating parties don't want to have such a drag, making stops after each sentence. They want to speak freely, and you need to memorize large parts of dialogue. You have to make notes, memorize it, and keep all the details intact. All the data, all the figures. Of course, the emotional part of the negotiations is very important, because not only the notative direct meaning of the word is taken into account, but the connotative part, the additional, the contextual things should also be taken into account. The emotional part is significant. If you fail to show the emotion of the speaker, it's bad. I recommend my students, if you hear what's being said and the information is going here to your head, and at the same time, simultaneously, it resonates with your soul, with your heart, and the emotion is happening there as well. When these two tracks coincide, your mind and your soul, you'll be the most successful in your work. Thank you, Nataliya.